Calm yourselves, my brothers. Calm yourselves. I'm here. No rioting this morning. Sorry, I gotta turn my light on. I was coming down the stairs and I spilled my coffee, and then it was I was hurrying and it's a mess, but it's good. We're here. Welcome to another episode of Caden's podcast. I got my hair down for you in the video today. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful morning. So I never got my hair down, but you know what? We don't care. We don't give a freak, right? So, welcome to another episode of Book Club where we read books and we talk about them. And some of you don't read the books, and that's fine because I read them and then we talk about them. And then the books are usually always about something to do with philosophy and human biology or finance and just how to make our lives better, understand where we come from, why we feel the way we feel, why we behave the way we behave, and these are the things that turn me on. So I read about them and then I talk about them on a podcast. And I do that. I do this once a week on Mondays at 8 a.m., but sometimes it's like 8:15 or 8:20 a.m. because I spill my coffee or I'm late from the gym or I sleep in a little bit. And you know what? But I tried. My goal is always 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, YouTube and Facebook under Caden's Podcast, and then under Twitch for my video game followers. We do Twitch at Alpha Seltzer. So we have a good time. We do it live. You can come join in the chat if you listen. If you listen to this after Monday, you could come join us Monday mornings. And we do it Monday morning because we all have busy schedules and busy lives, and we don't want to start off the week on the wrong foot, so we get the fuck out of bed, we get to the gym, and we do something challenging to start the week off right. And even though sometimes I snooze a couple times and then it puts me 15 minutes late, I'm still here, baby. And guess what? It's my podcast, and I'm the only one that does this. So if I'm late, then it's too bad. You just gotta hang out. So that's where we're at. That's where we're at. All right. Well, last week we did some what did we do? The subtle art of not giving a fuck, right? That was a good one. And then I kept going down the self-help world into the yoga world. I haven't done a yoga philosophy in a while. So, I couldn't find a book. Okay, well here's what happened. Here's what we're doing. Today we're going to cover a series of lectures by Ram Dass, and on Apple Book, he has a 5-hour track called "Be Nobody," Becoming Nobody, and let's talk about Ram Dass for a second, and I'll tell you how I got here, and then we'll talk about his lectures. All right. Who is Ram Dass? Ram Dass, this is the first thing off of Wikipedia. Ram Dass, born in 1931, died in 2019. Also known as Baba Ram Dass, was an American spiritual teacher, guru of modern yoga, psychologist, and author. His best-selling 1971 book, Be Here Now, which has been described by multiple reviewers as seminal. What does seminal mean? I'm going to highlight that and search Google for seminal. Strongly influencing later developments. Oh, denoting a whoa. Ugh. Yeah, something. This one, the second definition says relating to semen, but that can't be what they were referring to. So his work from his 1971 book, Be Here Now, helped popularize Eastern spirituality and yoga in the West. He authored or co-authored 12 more books on spirituality over the next 4 decades, including Grist for the Mill, How Can I Help, and Polishing the Mirror. I'm not going to read his entire fucking Wikipedia, but the big something he talks a lot about in these lectures is he was a psychologist for a long time before he dove into Eastern spirit. They say Eastern spirituality and yoga. He so his lectures, and we'll talk. Let me give you some context on these lectures. He let's see if I can find something. Ram Dass becoming nobody. Context. So the becoming nobody is stems from a film of all of his of some of his lectures, and so they have a whole website, becomingnobody.com. It's the quintessential portal to Ram Dass's life and teachings. The video, the movie. I wonder how long the movie was because the lectures were 5 hours. There were 5 1-hour lectures. So I wonder. Ooh, got some coffee right here too. Spilled it everywhere. Let's see. I want to know when the lectures were. There were 5 to 5. In fact, maybe there were a couple times where I thought maybe they had, like in one 1-hour session, they had transferred from video or from a lecture to a lecture or to a speech or something like they had, but they all premise on certain specific things. Let's see. This audio collection brings us 5 essential sessions featuring in the film Becoming Nobody, presented here in their entirety. They each beautifully illuminate a core dimension of Ram Dass's wisdom. Just give me a little more context, please. Through teaching stories, true accounts, eye-opening revelations, and his one-of-a-kind sense of humor, this legendary teacher helps show us the way out of the prison of our self-identity and into the joy of being at once nobody and the universal divine at play in the world. It's not giving me what I want. I'm going to look at the Apple descriptions once really fast to see if I can get what I want. There was one reference. I remember he made a reference about the year being like 1980 something. So the lectures are from, a long string of his teachings, but anyway. If you're a spiritual explorer of any age or tradition, chances are you've heard of Ram Dass. I've never heard of Ram Dass. This singular luminary began his somebody training as Richard Alpert, the 1960s Harvard psychologist turned hippie who tripped with Timothy Leary, befriended beat poets and Tibetan lamas, and found his lifelong guru in India and wrote the perennial classic, Be Here Now. Probably should have read that one first, if that was this super important text from him. I'll put it on the list, I guess. That's the somebody part of his story, but for those who've experienced Ram Dass live as he shares his insights and personal journey on the way of becoming nobody, he has been for many the spark that ignited them to the liberating truth of who they really are. Well, so I have no idea where these sessions come from, but that's Ram Dass, American psychologist Richard Alpert turned spiritual guru Ram Dass. So let's talk about his lectures, huh? Shall we? Did you get your coffee? You have your coffee yet? It's a beautiful day. It's going to be cold this week, and then it's going to be really warm, and I can't freaking wait. We had, I've been running a lot. My calves, super tender. But the weather right now, this is like perfect running weather. You start out a little bit frosty, but as you go, man, it feels so good. It feels good to take your shirt off too and have the sun beating down on you. Kayla Sierra in the chat. I'm so proud of you. Oh man, she's the sweetest. She's on Facebook. I think you're my first Facebook chat comment. Thanks for tuning in. This one's for you. So yeah, we did a lot of running, and it's time for everybody to get out there and do something challenging, like we talk about all the time. Just keep, you can always do more, and you can push yourself, and whatever you want to accomplish, you can do. You just got to go fucking after it. So, no excuses, right? That was the motto last week, and then come Friday, I decided to insanely overeat at dinner, and I was so sick, and I have a problem with food. I'm like legit addicted to food because I eat really well for the 5 days out of the week, and then I go out with my friends, and then I can't control myself. But when I'm home, I can control myself because I don't buy junk food. I just have a bunch of good food. I have a problem. I'm still working on it. For now, we're Becoming Nobody by Ram Dass. Session 1 was called Somebodyness. I'm going to lay this out in context, too, before we get too far into this. Something that I think is so critical for all spiritual conversations when we talk about yoga are the 8 limbs of yoga, and I've talked about them before, but they're really briefly referenced, just casually referenced in his conversations, and they're the fundamentals of what yoga is. And again, for those of you who maybe this is the first time you've heard me talk about yoga, it's a lot of people think yoga is just the stretching and the poses and the hot room, but yoga is a combination of 8 things, and the stretching is just one part. The postures is one part of yoga out of 8. Without reading, I'm not going to read the Sanskrit. I'm just going to. I pulled it up right here on yogateket.com. They have the Sanskrit name and then the translation. I'm just going to read the translation. Okay, mashed potatoes. Okay, I'm here. I was talking to my boss. Hey, we didn't even know you were gone, so thanks for coming back anyway. Number 1, self-restraint. 2, observance. Let's go back to self-restraint because I have very little self-restraint when it comes to food, unfortunately, but I'm working on it. I could be better. I could be more mindful of what I eat, how much I eat. I struggle when I'm in an atmosphere where the mood is light and everyone's having fun and maybe we're passing drinks around. I have no control. My diet is so the food that I eat when I'm at home, it's like the bare minimum. I eat red meat and fruit, and I love it, and I feel so good all week when I'm doing that. And then we go to Cafe Rio, and I get a salad with chips and queso, and I eat the whole thing because it's delicious. But it's way more food than I typically eat, a lot more different kinds of food. All right, anyway. 1, self-restraint. 2, observance. 3, movement and posture. That's the yoga poses, right? 4, pranayama, breath. Pranayama is the Sanskrit. And I said I wasn't going to read the Sanskrit, but I did on that one. 4 is breath. 5, withdrawal of senses. 6, concentration. 7, meditation. 8, union. Those are the 8 limbs of yoga. So a true yogi is observing. These are like the 8 commandments for yoga. You're observing all 8 of these at all times. At all times. And you're conscious of it. You're conscious and you're focused on all 8 of these. Self-restraint, your observances, posture, breath, withdrawal of senses. That's a pretty crazy thing to consider. Your withdrawal of senses. That's like it's like feeling pain but not being identified by pain, or happiness or pleasure, same thing. Concentration, meditation, and union. So Go study the 8 limbs of yoga a little bit more. I want to as well. I would love if someone wrote a book and there was 8 chapters, and each chapter was a limb of yoga. But I don't know if I haven't seen anything like that. Mashed potatoes. I had a terrible eating week in Vegas. LOL. Got to dial it back in this week. Yeah, me too, bud. Me too. You and me. We'll do it together. I mean, you're the biggest reason why I started this diet in the first place, because I can't let you ever weigh less than me ever again. So I'm trying to stay on top of it. 173 this morning, before my morning dump. So who knows where I'm really at? But 172 is the goal. Or no, yeah. I was at 172 and a half last week. I need to get back down to 172 and a half next week, and half a pound a week. That's the goal. That's the agenda. All right. So we're going to talk about Ram Dass becoming nobody again, finally. Session 1, somebodyness. Our bodies and careers are like suits that we put on. If you renounce, again, this is kind of fun. This was fun to listen to because it wasn't a book with really clearly drawn out points. It was like taking notes on a podcast. It was really interesting. I had to pay attention, and there was a lot of kind of dragging on, kind of like me. I drag on and say a lot of nothing for a long time, but then you hit a stride and you say a lot of really good stuff in a row. So I liked having it was variety. This is variety. I haven't taken notes on something like this in a while. It's been books for a long time. In fact, I think the last time I did a podcast, I took notes on something like a lecture or a podcast was Huberman's sleep podcast. So anyway, if you renounce something, it still has you. You're busy not doing or being that thing. This is, maybe not. It's not something from the 8 limbs, but if you focus on not being something, then you still identify as that thing. The lectures are called, the series is called Becoming Nobody. And if you think about, if you remember anything from my yoga podcasts in the past, the whole idea of yoga is to remove the observer from the body, from yourself. You are not your body. You are not your feelings. You are not your emotions. You are not your reactions. You are a separate entity that occupies this body. And I've talked about meditation before. Pure meditation is being able to observe the things that are happening in your life. If you reflect on a hard experience and the pain that comes with it, pure meditation is being able to step out of your body and observe and see how that is affecting you, the things that you're feeling, but not identifying with those things. And that's the premise of the title of these lectures. And if you have to focus on not being somebody, not being something, or not being identified by something, that thing still has you. That's what he says. You're just busy not doing that thing. Truly removing yourself from an identity. I don't know how to do that, but it takes, I imagine you have to start in this area where, like, if you're trying to break a smoking habit and you're constantly occupied with not smoking, you still identify as a smoker until your behavior becomes so changed, your mentality becomes so changed where you're not thinking about smoking, you don't identify as a smoker anymore. I don't know. That's kind of how I take it. If you are the fullness of the moment, you are all of the happy and sad things. Again, this is you might be familiar with Nirvana, and part of being enlightened is being reunited with the one, in Nirvana, with everything and everyone. And this is the 8th branch of yoga, union. So as you observe yourself, not as your body, but you observe your body separate from your identity, and your identity is everything else around you, then what was the note? You are all of the happy things. You are all of the sad things. And Sadhguru talks about this. How did he reference it? Something like we all come from the soil, right? If you like Adam and Eve, they come from, or let's see, Eve. That's a bad example. I thought of it wrong. I was thinking about the rib that comes from Adam's chest, but I was wrong. I'm thinking about dust and soil. And from a scientific point of view, you know what I love when people say, "You are what you eat," and it's kind of cliche, but you are actually literally what you eat, because the things you put in your body are the things that are going to fuel your body, and it's the things your body uses to build upon. So you are literally what you eat. And when you were conceived in your mother's womb, you were what she ate, and you were the building blocks of what she consumed. And that goes all the way back. And all humans die and go into the earth and decompose. All living organisms do. And then we are rebuilt with the same things. I wrote about this in my blog yesterday, which I didn't talk about, which I didn't reference. If you want to go check out my blog, go check out cadenkelly'sblog.wordpress.com. I wrote an entry yesterday about Mother Nature, and here's the circle of life where a plant sprouts from the ground, and an animal eats the plant, and then we eat the animal, and then we die and go back into the ground and become nutrients for the soil for another plant to grow that's eaten by another animal, that's eaten by another human. We're all from the soil. If you listen to Sadhguru on Rogan's podcast, he talks about how important having good soil is, and how we're collectively destroying the earth with our monocrop agriculture and other things, destroying the soil, the high quality nutrient soil. We don't have enough animals creating manure. Anyway, that was a good episode. That was a good podcast to listen to as well. I should have just entangled that. But, he goes on some pretty trippy conversations. You should just go listen to Sadhguru on Rogan. But a yogi observer recognizes that they are all things, that they are not their body, they are everything. They are everything else, and all people are one, and you are all the happy things, you are all the bad things, all the sad things. That is called karma. We have collective karma. Yeah, we did that by Sadhguru as well. We read that book. It's all so trippy, this kind of rhetoric, especially coming from a Mormon background, a spiritual background, where you are a spirit, and your spirit inhabits your body, and you could still look at it the same way, where you are not your body, you are your spirit that inhabits your body. I think most Christian dogma will teach that, but the difference is, when you die, Christianity says that you are a unique spirit, and then you return to live in heaven with other spirits and with God. But yoga and Buddhism is focused on reincarnation until enlightenment. And when you are enlightened, you become one with all the other enlightened beings. And it just repeats until all life is enlightened, right? Is that I think that's the way that this is all supposed to go for Buddhism. He doesn't talk about Buddhism. He talks about yoga, and yoga is a teaching in Buddhism, I believe. All right, let's keep going. I said, it sounds like he's talking about the unavoidableness of suffering, and that being nobody is freeing, not seeking things to be defined by. Yeah, we're gonna get into a couple of points that I thought were very fascinating. But I don't want to spoil it. I'm gonna keep going. He says, when you extricate yourself from your thoughts and your body, who you are has no time or space. You become responsive, not reactive. When you extricate yourself from your thoughts and your body, and I had to look this up. I'm going to do it again. The definition of extricate. but it just means to extract or to free from something, from a constraint or difficulty. So when you free yourself from your thoughts and your body, who you are has no space and no time. You become responsive and not reactive. It's hard to live outside of your body when it's the only thing you get to experience, right? That's how I feel. Your body is your identity, but enlightenment is not being identified by your body or by things outside in the world. You're not identified by things that you like or things that you don't like. In fact, none of those things have any impact on a enlightened person. They're just things that happen, and you recognize how they interact with your body. That's session 1, somebodyness. So being somebody really means being identified by things in the world and by your body. But nobodyness is by being identified by nobody or relating to nothing, right? Session 2, soul, incarnation, and just another cloud. He says consciousness has 3 planes. First, incarnation. Second, the soul. And then I didn't write what the third one was. Nice. Something about just another cloud, maybe. The ego values feeling high and runs away from the lows. But being in the moment and accepting life is being all of the good and all of the bad. The ego. This reminds me that I am going to, I bought Ryan Holiday's Ego is the Enemy, and there's unfortunately no audiobook for that, but I'm going to read that. Can I say, do people say in tandem with whatever book I'm reading this week, and then once I get that done, I'll do the podcast on it. Is that in tandem? I don't know if I've ever said that. Define in tandem. Yeah, alongside each other. Wow, fuck yeah, we're getting smart out here. So, but I will announce what book I'm going to be reading for next week at the end of this podcast. I'm going to do that. So if you want to read along with me, or if you want to prep for the next week, you're able to. So, but ego is the enemy because ego is what is identifying with the world. The ego values feeling high and runs away from the lows. Being in the moment and accepting life is being all of the good and all of the bad. It's having no ego. The world is afraid of death and seeks to cure it. Death is a part of life, and the soul is in all things as all life is. You remember Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, where he says the future of the world rests in the hands of AI, and he talks about how death is what's the phrase he uses? Death is a disease that can be cured, basically. And we just don't understand the science to all of the things that go along with death, with organ failure and with old age, and how to stop those processes. And so a lot of modern humanists will say we want to live forever, and so we'll cure death. Yeah, but he says, and what most yoga lies, what yoga says, and what he just said is, death is a natural part of life, and you are not your body that dies. You are your spirit that lives forever in nirvana. So death is not something to fear. It is just as natural as life, and the ego is what's afraid of death because we hold value to something in this life, right? Something like that. So we seek to cure death. Quote, your incarnation is about extricating, there's that word again, or freeing yourself from attractions and aversions. Your incarnation is about extricating yourself from attractions and aversions, so you're not lost in incarnation. That's what you should. Yeah. So that's a direct quote. I probably wrote that down because that's like direct call to action. Extricate yourself from attractions and aversions, so you're not lost in incarnation. yeah, these three states, these three planes of consciousness. Incarnation is your body, the physical plane of consciousness, your soul or your spirit. And then I'm guessing because the session title is called Soul, Incarnation, and Just Another Cloud, that the last part of consciousness is this living beyond your soul in the eternal realm of nirvana. He quotes Christ. He says, whatever the scripture is that says, "Be in the world, but not of the world." Shed your attractions and your aversions. And then he quotes the Buddha. Buddha. Suffering is clinging. No clinging equals no suffering. I said that's not the direct quote in my notes. I wonder what the direct quote is. Is clinging Buddha? Oh, it's part of the Noble Truths. Well, I wrote the Noble Truths down, so I'll just keep going. So yeah, suffering means you are clinging on to something. If you suffer from something, or if you, it means you're clinging to something or some belief, some principle. So removing your clinging, what you cling to, means directly that you remove suffering. That's session 2, Soul, Incarnation, and Just Another Cloud. All right, session 3, Form, Suffering, and Embracing Our Humanity. All right, there is perception of suffering and reaction of suffering. There's observing the suffering, and then there's feeling and reacting to suffering. Meditation is opening to what is, not pushing out or forcing in, but brewing with what is. I talked about that earlier. Meditation is opening to what is, not pushing out or forcing in. It's not changing, it's accepting and observing and brewing with what is. I remember laying in my yoga meditating, and we had our teacher was reciting something and said something along the lines of, you might be feeling uncomfortable, and you might not, maybe she just said, you're probably not feeling comfortable right now, but that feeling will pass. So sit with it as long as you can. Brew. He says brew with it, but sit with those uncomfortable feelings and observe them. And something that I really consciously have to focus on when I'm sitting in yoga, when I'm meditating, the more still you can be, the better, because when you react to uncomfortableness, you are not observing the suffering or the discomfort. You are reacting to it. And the advice is there's perception of the suffering, and then there is reaction to it. So when I'm laying there and I have sweat running off of my body like crazy, and it itches, and it tickles me, and it sounds so silly to say, but I want to wipe the sweat off my face and out of my nose and out of my ears, because it freaking tickles. But I consciously decide I'm going to sit with this discomfort, with the uncomfortableness of this, and it eventually passes, and I don't feel like a better person because of it. But it's this exercise of being in discomfort, laying in discomfort, and observing it as it happens to my body, because I'm not my body. I am this spirit, this eternal everythingness outside of my body, and I'm observing what's happening to my body. And you should do the same when you're actually suffering from something, when something's happening in your life, when there's hard things coming and going. You should be able to sit in meditation, whether you're laying down or sitting upright or sitting in a chair or looking at a sunrise or walking meditation, where you can consciously observe the feelings that are happening inside you and not react to them, but just observe them. And it's always easier said than done. But being able to observe what's happening to you gives you clarity for how you should react, how you should behave with it, behave after it. Because we don't live our lives by only observing. We have to take action. And if we want to improve our lives, we have to do shit. That's why I'm always saying, go do hard shit. Go do some hard shit. But you have to be able to sit down and contemplate how you feel. You have to think about, why am I uncomfortable, and why are things not going my way, or why is this happening, or why do I suck at this, or whatever. And then brew with those feelings, and then take action. Make appropriate action. Don't react, but be a conscious actor, right? So it's all good in principle. And I think I don't know how much, I'm not a super spiritual person anyway. I have a hard time grasping this concept that I identify with the world, or with all life outside of my body, because it's a spiritual aspect to this practice. I have a hard time with spiritual anything. Um, I can at least accept that if maybe I'm not my body, maybe my mind is detached from my body, and I can separate those things. Maybe I don't agree necessarily that I am a spirit, an eternal spirit that exists with all life, that it is observing this current. I don't know. It's all pretty wild, but at the very least, if you're not a spiritual person like me, you can accept that your mind is a different processing system than your body. At least that's how I can at least feel that and experience that. When I have discomfort, or even when I have pleasure, I can I should I should conscious I make conscious effort to detach the logic and the reason behind the experience, the emotions. And I think that's meditation. So whether you believe in the eternalness of a spirit and whatever, I think there's an insane amount of value in saying, I'm feeling good or I'm feeling bad, and I'm not going to react emotionally because I feel good or because I feel bad. I'm going to sit with these feelings and think about them. I'm going to meditate on them, and then accept them for what they are, and then make appropriate decisions afterwards. I think that's really sound advice, whether you believe in the spiritual aspect part of it or not. So let's move on to Buddha's Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is, there is suffering. Remember when we talked about, I think it was Mark Manson's book last week. He explains how Buddha, he was a prince, and then he left his castle, his kingdom, his father's kingdom, because he wanted to understand suffering. So he subjected himself to an insane amount of suffering. And then he learned that suffering actually sucks, and imposing self-inflicted suffering is unnecessary. But nonetheless, there is suffering. There is imposed suffering, and there is uncontrollable suffering. There's things that happen to people that you have no control over, no say of, and it causes you suffering. So that's like the base model for Buddha. There is suffering. The second truth is, the cause an individual suffers is because it clings to something, which is very interesting. And I don't know if I mentioned it. I think I mentioned it later. So I'll use a different example now. Clinging, if you suffer from hunger, the direct application is because you cling to food. And however extreme the case is, in my case, I live in a privileged position, and I have access to lots of food all the time. So when I am 500 calories below my regular eating habits, I suffer because I cling to the amount of food that I eat. And that's a very mild case. There are people in this world today that are suffering from extreme hunger, and they live thousands of calories below their means. Thousands, 1 or 2,000 calories below their means every day. It causes extreme hunger. And what's interesting is when you cling to the food and you identify yourself with food, and you cling to it, and then you don't have it, you will suffer. And even though your body needs it to survive, these gurus, these yogis that live on this higher plane, like Buddha, will subject themselves to severe hunger and not suffer. Their body will be famished and have no energy and feel like shit, but they do not suffer from the pain, the hunger pangs, right? So I'm not saying that you can, starve and not suffer, but the point is, do you identify with the pain? Do you identify with the hunger? And if you do, you will suffer. But if you remove yourself from the identity, if you remove the identity of hunger, and hunger is just the example I'm using, but you can use it for anything. If you feel lonely, it's because you identify with being in a relationship or having friends or whatever. But if you remove that identity, you will not feel lonely. You will not suffer from loneliness. You'll be content with the condition of your life. And if you make $0, if you suck at your job, or if you're missing 2 legs, do you suffer because you identify with having 2 legs? Do you cling to the identity of having 2 legs, or do you not? Can you remove the identity? Can you stop clinging to that identity? It will end suffering. Huh? Let's keep going. So what I just said is the third noble truth. The third noble truth. You let go of clinging, you end suffering. And then the fourth noble truth is the eightfold path, which is the 8 limbs of yoga, I believe. I'm going to just Google what is the eightfold path. I believe it's the Wikipedia says the eightfold path consists of right view, it's not the 8 limbs. Right view is 1, right resolve, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi, or meditative absorption of union. And I think I wrote that down it sounds familiar. I think that we read that in the Siddhartha book, the fictional history of Buddha's life. So, those are Buddha's 4 noble truths. There is suffering. The cause an individual suffers is because it clings to something. You let go of clinging, you end suffering. And the eightfold path to stop clinging are those 8 things. These are like the 8 real commandments. Right view, right resolve, right speech, right conduct, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi, or meditative absorption. So this is from session 3 still. And the last note I took from session 3 is the goal isn't to get high or to avoid lows. It's about getting free, about accepting your highs and accepting your lows. This is how you become nobody. And why would anybody want to become nobody? Because when you identify with something, it causes you to suffer. And here's my conflict with this. I'm going to take some coffee real quick. Here's my issue with becoming nobody. If you stop clinging, you stop suffering. So are you supposed to not cling to anything? Are you not supposed to care to anybody? C says, I don't want to be nobody. I want to be somebody. I know. That's what I'm saying. So, here's what, okay. He says in these lectures, he says at the beginning of one of them, he says, I'm not totally enlightened. I've experienced some enlightenment, but I choose to remain in this plane so I can continue to teach and help other people, to help lift other people. So in some sense, I think pure enlightenment is removing attachment to everything. You don't care about anything, and consequently, you don't care about anyone. And what's the point of life? What's the meaning of life if the point is not to care about anything? And I don't know if that's necessarily the point that he or yoga tries to make. I think the point is and I'm going to use the principle from the book from last week that it's not about not caring about anything, it's about choosing what to care about. The subtle art of not giving a fuck is not about not caring, it's about choosing better things to care about. And I don't think that I if we want to take the example of food, you can feel hunger pangs but not suffer from them. You can do the same thing with relationships or people that you care about. If you care about somebody, if you cling to a relationship because like your marriage, you love somebody, your kids, and they let you down or they do something that disappoints you or they directly hurt you or directly go out of their way to harm you, I guess it's kind of dramatic, but if you care about the actions of someone that you love about and they do something wrong or that betrays you, it will cause hurt. But I guess the point is you can love them, you can care about something, but not be identified by it. And if somebody betrays you, then the suffering might be reason to feel suffering, but you don't identify with. You don't identify by the. Is this kind of making sense? Like you can care about the thing, but you don't identify with it, and so when it works against you, it doesn't cause you to suffer. I mean that makes sense to me. I don't think these guys are saying don't care about anything and you'll be enlightened. In fact, I think really pure love, true love is caring, and you care about the people that are important to you think and feel and say and do, but you don't identify with it. And you don't even identify with how you yourself behave or think or feel because you are not your body, right? You're not your thoughts. You are removed from your thoughts and you observe them. You don't suffer from your thoughts. You don't suffer from your behavior. You don't identify with them. But if you identify with your behavior and if you identify with somebody else's behavior and they behave inappropriately, it will cause suffering. Mashed potatoes, bottom frags in Valorant or nobody. I'm sorry, you had... bottom frags in Valorant are nobody. I'm sorry you had to hear it here. I'm not a bottom frag, though. I baited that whole team for your free ace. You're welcome. Well, all right. It was a nice ace. I'll raise a glass to that ace. It was a solid ace. So that's my thought on this being nobody. I mean, if you want to be like a monk that lives in the mountains and just reflect on the nature of spirituality and remove yourself, you become celibate and you disconnect yourself with your family and your friends and everything else, all worldly pleasures, and you'll live on a different plane because you're living under these strict, insane conditions, and you identify with nothing. And not only do you not identify with anything, but you don't have access to anything. You are nothing. You become literally nobody. But there is pleasure and there is happiness in life by uplifting and helping others, but not being attached to their success, being attached to their happiness. Because if just like you don't want to identify with people that hurt you or things that hurt you, you don't want to identify with things that give you pleasure or things that cause happiness, because it's the same thing. It causes you become attached to something, and then when that thing lets you down, it causes suffering. So you don't want, I guess maybe becoming nobody isn't not caring about anything. It's about not identifying with anything and choosing better things to care about. Mashed Potato says you can't control anything other than yourself. So if you're basing your happiness on stuff you can't control, pretty hard to be happy. That's exactly the point, baby. That's great insight. You can't, and that's like the premise of Stoicism, is to only focus on things that are in your control. Anything that's out of your control are things that you shouldn't pay attention to. You shouldn't give any effort to, because they're literally things that are not in your control. And that was the whole premise of Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. You have no control of being a prisoner in a concentration camp, yet you can still choose not to suffer because you don't identify with the things you can't control. You don't concern yourself with those things. You just concern yourself with what you can control. And for him, it was very little. It was about rationing his food and interacting with the inmates and with the prison the guards and doing his work and doing it well. It was very few options, but same point. You've been listening to my podcast. That's why you got that thought. You've been listening to Caden's podcast. Very impressed. All right, let's keep going. Session 4. Fear, anger, love, and choosing. Spiritually, you acknowledge your emotions, but don't act on them. You also don't ignore or deny them. I love that. Again, it's not about chasing or avoiding pain or pleasure. It's about accepting them, acknowledging them. Do not ignore them or deny them. If you get mad, he says, direct quote, if you get me mad, that's my problem, close quote. He echoes Mark Manson taking 100% responsibility of your life. Others may be to blame, but you are the only one responsible. If you make me angry, it's you might be to blame for the thing that you did, but I'm the only one responsible for reacting angrily. Angrily? Is that a word? Freedom goes beyond being right or wrong, being righteous or wicked. Anger is a form of righteousness because you believe you have been wronged. Anger is a form of righteousness because you believe you have been wronged. He says anger is not a functional commodity because it's divisive. If you want to be free, don't work out your problems. Let them go, even when you're right. If you want to be free, don't work out your problems. Let them go, even when you're right. Anger is only useful when rooted in love and equanimity as a teaching device. Anger with love is an effective teaching tool. Anger without love is destructive. He kind of contradicts himself there. He says anger is not a functional commodity because it's divisive, and then goes on to say that that anger is useful when it's rooted in love and equanimity. He uses the example of Christ going through the temple. Actually, maybe he didn't use that example. Maybe I only thought of it. But remember the story of Christ flipping merchant tables at the temple because he was disrespecting the house of the Lord. They were disrespecting the house of the Lord. And isn't that one of the only examples of Christ being angry in the New Testament? So, I don't know. Anyway, I feel like that's kind of contradictory. I don't think acting out anger is ever useful. However, and again, just kind of like what I've been talking about this whole time. If you get me mad, that's my problem. You might be responsible for doing something wrong that makes me angry, but I'm the only one responsible for acting out in anger. But then he says, if you act out in anger out of love and equanimity, then it's an effective teaching tool. And then maybe you have kids, mashed potatoes. You have kids, and when they do something that disappoints you, an effective parent act out, even with love and equanimity. How do you act out anger with love and equity? Isn't still anger? I don't know. Maybe I kind of think about my grandpa, or my mom and her sisters talk about their dad and how he's always raised their kids. They say he never raised his voice, and he never acted out of anger, but he usually expressed disappointment or dissatisfaction with inappropriate behavior. And I've always appreciated that because I'm never one that likes to act out of anger. I don't like the divisiveness of anger. But when do you think anger is ever useful? If it's ever useful, can you ever act out of anger like Christ did, maybe by flipping merchant tables, and it being effective, or more effective than any other teaching tool. I mean, I know when I was a kid and I would be a dickhead. My dad he would be like, what's wrong with you? And then he would knuckle me on the top of my head. And he said that's what that's what his dad did to him. That's what his grandpa did to him. That was just a thing. They would like fucking just knock, with the knuckle on top of my head. Mashed Potato says, getting upset at your kids with love is so hard to encapsulate in a Twitch comment, but it's possible. Well, you don't have to try it. I'm just, I'm also just kind of elaborating on the thought. I don't know how, I just don't know how to, like, you love your kids and they do something inappropriate and you want to teach them that what they did is wrong. So you, I don't know, like anger. If you want to define anger, it could be a knuckle on the top of the head, or raising your voice, or a spanking, or something like that, or a punishment like timeout, or taking toys away, or something. I think there's lots of different ways to parent. There's no one right way to parent, and I have no fucking idea how to be a parent. But I imagine that they gotta, those kinds of punishment it's kind of like anger acting out of love, and it's like negative. Excuse me. It's like in psychology, I think it's called positive punishment, where you respond to a behavior by trying to reduce its occurrence. Instead of rewarding it, you punish it. So I don't know. I'm kind of going off on the thought, but anger, I've never been one to, appreciate anger, raising your voice. But anyway, it's got to be effective at some point. Maybe I'll be a parent at some time and I'll be able to experiment myself and I'll read more parenting books and we'll talk about responding angrily. But if I'm going to think about, even with my partner or with my friends, my siblings, withdrawing from the encounter and just accepting things for the way they are, and then coming back to them later and coming back to them with cool heads seems to work. But that's with mature people. Mashed potatoes. I just say I love you a lot when I'm disciplining. Like when I tell him he can't have candy, I try to tell him that it's not good for him to eat candy all the time, that I want him to be healthy because I love him. That's really sweet, actually. I wish somebody would talk to me like that. That's very interesting, actually. But he's not going to get that. He just wants the fucking candy, I'm sure. Kids are so dumb. And not your kid, obviously. But I was talking to my mom last night about back in the old days in high school when we all hated going to Hayden's house because your parents only ever had broccoli in the cabinet, but everyone loved coming to my house because Brooke always had cereal and top ramen. And I was talking to my mom and she said, well, should I have raised you different with food? And I was like, I don't know if you could have, because it doesn't matter how much you know about food. When you're a kid especially, you just want food that tastes good and you want to eat it. I just wanted to eat a lot of food. I didn't care so much about the nutrition. Now I do. Now we all have to. But yeah, I don't think I think kids, they just want that's a tough thing. It's candy. So, wow, that felt so. Yeah, your ass at Valorant, Hayden. I love you. All right, let's wrap this up. Session 5, approaching the transition and reflections on suffering. So this session 5, 10 minutes of it was from a lecture, and the last 50 minutes was a meditation. And it was, I didn't get any notes from it. But I did get a couple notes about death. He says death is part of the process, not an end. Denial of death keeps you fixated on it. Uh, yeah, death is part of the process. Again, like we said earlier, ignoring death or trying to cure death is counterintuitive, because to live is to die. And if you are a spiritual being, you don't die with um your spirit doesn't die when your body ceases to operate. Your body keeps going, or your spirit keeps going rather. But we're so fixated on our bodies and how our physical bodies. We try to stop our physical bodies from dying. And for most spiritual philosophy, it's counterintuitive, because part of living is dying. And part of existing is, like, most of our existence comes before and after our physical life. So and then the denial of death keeps you fixated on it. And the way he gives some examples about how he's spent a lot of time in the East with families of, he says they have so little access to medicine and hospitals and healthcare that most people were surrounded by death all the time, and most people died in their homes. Grandparents and parents and kids, they died surrounded by their loved ones, not in hospitals, and not all hooked up to machines. So the death rate was higher. But he says most people in the East are not afraid of death because they've been surrounded by it their whole lives. And in the West, I've never seen someone pass. I've seen my grandparents, my great grandparents, in their final moments, and then later on in a casket. But I've never seen someone, like, the breath stop, the heart stop, pronounced dead. Yeah, death is it's a fascinating thing to contemplate, but the denial of it keeps you fixated on it, and if you're fixated on it, you're probably not going to accept it. Is that another Valorant comment? I'm gonna just finish this and I'm gonna read it. I want to read it. The last note I took was, he says, "When the people you love die, they live through you." And this is a beautiful way to end this, because this reminds me of the Paramount Plus hit TV show 1883. And it's about the pioneers on the Oregon Trail going from Texas to Oregon. And Sam Elliott, he lived a tough motherfucker. He lost his whole family to smallpox, but decided that he was going to do one last thing for his wife. He was going to take this family to Oregon, and he wanted to sit on the ocean. And towards the end of the show, it's not really a spoiler, it's just a little sentimental piece by Sam Elliott. Someone asks Sam, "Why are you going to Oregon?" And he says, "Because I want to take my wife to the ocean. Because when the people you love die, they live through your eyes, and they live through you. So I'm going to take my wife to the ocean, and it's so beautiful." And then there's something, just a little bit of a sentimental piece. I won't spoil what happens in the show, but I think I personally think that's beautiful. I love it. So happy to adopt that into my life, because I have not, knock on wood, fortunate enough to have most of my family and friends still alive, but everybody will die. And the Stoics preach memento mori, to contemplate your own death and to contemplate the death of everyone you love, because it's inevitable and we never know when it'll come. And if you don't think about it, meditate on it, or talk about it, it will catch you by surprise. Well, now I'm just kind of realizing that it is memento mori is a little counterintuitive to that last note, because the denial of death keeps you fixated. Oh, I guess maybe the denial of death keeps you fixated on it, but not contemplating death. Accepting death is good. Denial of death keeps you fixated on it. But accepting death and embracing it, that's memento mori. Embracing it for yourself and for those that you love. And then when it comes, it will still be sad and emotional. But if you embrace it now, it will. And if you do not identify with death and with the death of your loved ones, it will not. You won't suffer from it if you don't cling to. If you don't identify with the suffering of death, you won't suffer from it. So that's becoming nobody, and really the idea is don't cling to anything, and you won't suffer. Don't or and then even more important than that is don't cling to things that don't matter. Cling to the right things. Embrace the nuances of life, the crazy things of life, and you'll live a better life. You'll live a suffer-free life. Adopt the Four Noble Truths from Buddha, and you're on the path to removing suffering and becoming nobody. And we don't want to stop caring about anything. We don't want to literally become nobody. We want to adopt these principles because being nobody means less suffering, and being nobody embraces this idea. It embraces the idea you are not your body. You are a spirit inhabiting your body, and you don't identify with the pain or the pleasure that your body experiences. So that's being nobody, becoming nobody, by Ram Dass. And you guys are going off. I'm not gonna read your comment. I'm just gonna wait till after the pod to read your comments. So I'm gonna wrap this up. I want to say thanks for showing up, you guys. You kind of went off on each other there at the end. It looks like. I enjoy it. That's what we're here for. We're here for a good ass time. Next week, I'm going to be reading. This book's been on my want to read for a long time, but I've been intimidated by it because it's another 20-hour book. But it's supposed to be one of the most influential books I think most people have ever read. I think Bill Gates commented on it and said, "This is my new favorite book of all time." It's called Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert B. Cialdini, Cialdini, Cialdini. I have no idea. PhD. Yeah, it's thick ass book, very fine text, and no pictures. So it's gonna be a long read. But I'm really excited about it. So next week, anticipate this: Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. And yeah, I'm gonna try to just be a week ahead on the books that I'm reading, so that you can plan on reading with if you want, or whatever else. Saint Steve's actual question: you still listening to all of the books or reading physical copies? It's still 90% listening, 10% reading from the physical book. This one, of course, was all listening because there was no book. It was a compliment to a movie. The Ram Dass one was, but a book like this that's so thick. When I'm out working, I'll listen to it at 1x speed, but then I'll come home and usually I could put in a couple hours at 2x speed and read along, so I don't miss any of the juice. Can't do that at work. I don't want to miss too much while I'm working. But yeah, it's still like 90% listening, 10% physical copy reading. But I did say probably after this one, I'll be doing Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday, and that will be only physical copy because there's no audiobook, unfortunately. So that one will be all physical copy, and that will probably be that'll be the first all physical copy book that I'll read. So that'll be fun. Thanks for showing up to the pod. 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. You can find this live on YouTube and Facebook and Twitch under Cadence Podcast. You can listen to it on Spotify. You're probably already listening to it on Spotify. That's fine. You can find me on my socials. Cadence Podcast on YouTube. KKelly_7 on Twitter. Or all of the links for those are on my blog, CadenKellysBlog.wordpress.com. I try to post a couple TikToks a week. I try to write in a blog once a week. I do the podcast once a week. I'm trying to systemize a business. I'm trying to build a business right now. So I got a lot of shit on my plate, but this all is so important to me because This is my effort to being the best person I can be and to be the most successful I can be. And I saw TikTok. This is how we're gonna end it. I saw a TikTok or an Instagram video or something. How the information to action ratio is insanely imbalanced, especially in today's world, where I can sit around and everybody can consume an insane amount of information, and if you want to pursue something, you can learn how to do it to the T. But the problem is nobody takes action. Action is always, I won't say always harder, but action is very difficult. It requires a lot of vulnerability. When you put yourself out there to do something new, to try something new, you're probably going to suck at it and you're going to feel really uncomfortable. However, we're learning not to identify with the discomfort, to embrace it, and to do the shit anyway. Because if it aligns with our values and it aligns with our goals, we should be doing it. It'll make us a happier person down the road. And whether it's for me, it's not about being rich or famous or whatever. It really is about being accountable to myself by following through with this shit. That's why I do the podcast. That's why I make the TikToks. It gives me more time to think about what I'm consuming and to give me direct application for my business and for my personal life and my relationships and my personal finances and my spirituality and whatever. So take action. That's the fucking thing, is take action. Don't be scared of the shitty first draft. I can't remember who coined that phrase, but the shitty first draft, if you can get through that, you can accomplish just about anything. So don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated by action. Take action. We do the studying. We do the hard work. But then we got to do something. So go do some hard shit this week. Challenge yourself. Push yourself. Be a little bit uncomfortable. There's nothing wrong with being uncomfortable. It just sucks to feel that way. That's it. That's all. It's not like it's not like the world is going to come tumbling down because you feel awkward making a TikTok, or you don't really know what to say on a podcast, or you're a little bit embarrassed of sharing your music. Those are all things that I feel. I want to play music and share music, but I'm always embarrassed that people are not going to like it. So just go do some hard shit. Have a great week. We'll be here next week. It's April. It's fucking getting warm. Go outside, get some sunlight in your eyes and on your skin, and you'll feel better. We'll see you next week.
して